Let's go.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. For this second speech, I'm going to be talking about Mars Science City. As we know, Dubai is synonymous of luxurious skyscrapers and opulence. It is this slick metropolis in the middle of a vast red desert. And unfortunately, I've never been, but the people who have been say that there's something otherworldly about it. Some people say that when they go to Dubai, it's like they've stumbled upon a film set for a sci-fi film. But Dubai is about to launch its most out-of-the-world project yet, Mars Science City. In 2017, the UAE announced their ambition to colonize Mars within the next 100 years. But actually, architects and scientists have already started imagining what a Martian city might look like. And they've actually started to recreate this imaginary Martian city in the desert outside Dubai. And the location has been well chosen because the desert surrounding Dubai is bright red, which will enable the scientists to replicate the appearance and the color of the red planet Mars. What is Mars Science City? Well, it's, as I said, a replica of a supposed Martian city, which will cover 176,000 square meters, which is basically the equivalent of 30 football pitches. And it will cost around $135 million. The Mars Science City is intended to be a space for Dubai's Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center. The place is where they will develop their technology, which will be needed to colonize Mars. The architects have been asked to design a prototype for a city which will be suitable for sustaining life on Mars. Mars has a very thin atmosphere. It has no global magnetic field whatsoever, which means there is very little protection from radiation. The temperature is also a problem because the temperature is actually minus 63 degrees centigrade. And on top of that, there is very little air pressure. This means that liquids tend to evaporate into gas very quickly. This could result in tissue swelling and circulation loss. And it would also mean that a human's blood would boil if they were not sufficiently protected. So how have the scientists managed to replicate all of this in Mars Science City? Essentially, what they've done is they've built these pressurized biodomes. They have covered them with a transparent polyethylene membrane. The polyethylene membrane is meant to work as an insulator. It's meant to let the sun in, trap the solar heat, and enable heat transfer because heat transfer happens extremely slowly on Mars. Then they've used oxygen. They've used oxygen by applying electricity to underground ice. And the idea is that this oxygen will fill each dome. Then the idea is that they will power and heat these biodomes using solar energy. What about the buildings? Well, the buildings are 3D printed. They've used 3D printed sand from the desert. In a supposed Martian city, they would be using Martian soil, but in this case, they've had to use desert sand, obviously. The rooms are around 20 feet underground, and they are so far underground in order to protect human beings from harmful radiation and from supposed meteors. Some scientists say that actually in the future on Mars, you could actually build skylights in underground caves, which would actually work like aquariums with fish swimming around. The water windows would actually act as a shield to protect people from radiation, but they would also allow light in and heat. I don't know about you, but I find that a very beautiful image, the idea of fish swimming in a sort of aquarium above your head and around you. I think that would be really beautiful and quite interesting. Anyway, the Mars Science City will contain an educational facility, a museum, an amphitheatre, and a co-working office space. None of this has actually been built yet, but the project is underway. It's just in its very elementary stages for the time being. So unfortunately, you can't go and see what it would look like right now. However, what they also intend to build are laboratories where they will once again simulate life on Mars. These are laboratories for food, energy, water, and also agricultural testing. Basically, the idea is to see whether human life is really possible on Mars. And they also want to see whether you can grow food and crops on Mars or in an area where the Martian conditions are replicated in some way. So the UAE's strategy is actually called the Mars 2117 strategy. It's because by the year 2117, they want to have built the first settlement on Mars. I'm not joking, this is actually their real strategy. And they want to lead this global scientific race to take people to Mars. As I was saying in my previous speech, this is all part of a geopolitical ploy. Because although the UAE claims that these missions are purely civilian in nature and not military, it does seem to be part of the UAE's more general desire to assert dominance in the geopolitical realm. And as we know, traditionally, the biggest players, if you like, in the spatial domain have been Russia, or the USSR as it was called back then, the USA, and now China. And many people are surprised by the fact that such a small country as the UAE, is now sending probes into space, into the Mars orbit. So the UAE seems to be asserting its dominance more and more. Finally, and in conclusion, although you can't actually go to Dubai and see this Martian city because it's not yet being constructed, you can actually go to a museum, because they've built a museum which actually showcases all of humanity's greatest successes in the spatial domain. So although we might have to wait a while to see what a Martian city might look like, you can actually go to this museum, and I've seen pictures of it online and it looks really interesting. So I hope you've enjoyed the speech, and I hope it's managed to transport you to somewhere quite exciting in the midst of these uncertain and difficult times. Thank you.